Good morning, everyone. I'm Brokoslaw Laschowski. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in the Temerty Faculty of Medicine at the University of Toronto and the Toronto Rehabilitation Institute. And today I'm going to talk about our ongoing research in computer vision and deep learning for automated control of robotic leg prostheses and exoskeletons. But first, I just want to mention ScienceForUkraine, which is an initiative that I helped develop to provide support to Ukrainian students and researchers that have been affected by the Russian invasion. Thus far, we've been able to register more than 2,200 research labs from over 100 countries worldwide who are willing to fully fund Ukrainian scholars to come and do research. And so if you're interested to learn more about that initiative, then please check out our website, ScienceForUkraine.eu. And this initiative actually helped disseminate our U of T summer program for Ukrainian students. Here you see myself with several of the students, and this is hosted by the Department of Computer Science and the Vector Institute. And being Ukrainian Canadian, I do take these initiatives personally, and so if you're interested in getting involved, I'd be more than happy to speak with you after my talk. So with that being said, just to motivate my talk today, there are currently hundreds of millions of individuals worldwide with mobility impairments due to conditions such as Parkinson's disease, cerebral palsy, spinal cord injury, osteoarthritis, and most notably aging. There are also conditions like limb amputation, stroke, and MS, although I don't present data for those here. Now, fortunately, robotic prosthetics can replace the propulsive function of the amputated biological legs and allow patients with amputation to perform daily locomotor activities that require power generation, for example, climbing stairs. There are also robotic exoskeletons, which act in parallel with the musculoskeletal system, and these devices can replace the propulsive function of weakened or impaired biological muscles due to aging and or physical disabilities. However, control of these robotic devices is extremely challenging. The majority of devices use some form of hierarchical control architecture, whereby the high-level controller is responsible for determining the patient's desired locomotion mode. Then a mid-level controller uses some mathematical model to relate the locomotor activity to some desired reference trajectories. And finally, the low-level controller is responsible for tracking these reference trajectories using local closed-loop feedback control. Now, I specialize in high-level control of these devices. And so the state-of-the-art in automated high-level control uses sensors on the patient and or on the device. These data streams are then often fused together, and some pattern recognition algorithm is then used to predict the desired locomotion mode from some high-level decision space. However, these sensors can only really estimate the current state of the system, which is somewhat analogous to walking blindfolded. Now, in theory, an environment recognition system consisting of a wearable camera and an image classification algorithm could be used to predict the oncoming walking environment prior to physical interactions, which can then improve the speed and accuracy of the locomotion mode predictions. And this has been the focus of our research. Now, a number of wearable camera systems have been used to sense the walking environment. However, the corresponding image classification algorithms, as shown here, have been limited to heuristics, statistical pattern recognition, or machine learning algorithms that require manual feature engineering, which can be both time-consuming and suboptimal. Now, in contrast, deep learning can replace these hand-designed features with multi-layer networks that can automatically and efficiently learn the optimal image features directly from training data. And this is the unique approach that we've taken. And so if you're interested to learn more about these different image classification algorithms, then please check out our 2020 BioROB paper. So our research objective over the years has been to develop accurate and robust environment recognition systems powered by computer vision and deep learning AI. And this is intended to improve the automated control and decision-making of next-generation robotic leg prosthetics and exoskeletons in rehabilitation medicine. So back in 2018, we designed our preliminary system using a chest-mounted wearable camera, as shown here in the video. This was used to collect images of indoor and outdoor real-world walking environments. We then manually labeled approximately 34,000 images as either inclined stairs, declined stairs, or level ground terrain. These wearable camera images then served as inputs to a custom-designed deep convolutional neural network used for image classification, and the resulting multiclass confusion matrix showed that our preliminary system was able to achieve approximately 95% overall prediction accuracy on this real-world visual data. Now, here are some interesting examples where our deep learning model misclassified the walking environment. The images in the top row were misclassified as inclined stairs, presumably because of the horizontal line features throughout the image. The images in the middle row were misclassified as level ground terrain, and these examples nicely highlight the importance of accurate environment classification for safety, such that a misclassification could potentially cause a patient to fall down a flight of stairs. And finally, the miscellaneous images in the bottom row were misclassified as declined stairs. And so we presented this preliminary environment recognition system at the 2019 ICOR conference, where we were able to establish the feasibility of using deep learning for this new computer vision application. Now, since then, a number of research labs have likewise used convolutional neural networks for image classification of walking environments. However, each of these deep learning models, including our original system, were each trained and tested on different computer vision datasets, which makes direct comparisons between these different systems quite challenging. And so this motivated us to develop the open source large-scale ExoNet dataset. Again, we used a wearable RGB camera to collect images of indoor and outdoor real-world walking environments. However, this time we collected over 52 hours of video, which amounted to approximately 5.6 million images. And we uniquely collected these images across multiple seasons in order to take into account different weathered surfaces like snow, grass, and multicolored leaves. We then manually annotated these images using a new hierarchical labeling architecture with 12 individual classes, as shown here on the right. This included both steady and transition states, and we manually labeled over 923,000 images using this new architecture. So here are some examples of both steady and transition states. The images in the top row show me walking with a robotic exoskeleton while wearing our computer vision system. And these are examples of steady states such that the visual field of view shows only continuous level ground terrain. And these visual fields of view are essentially what the exoskeleton sees. In contrast, the images in the bottom row are examples of transition states, such that the visual field of view shows a transition from level ground terrain to either inclined stairs, as is on the left, or a bench on the right. Here's an overall breakdown of the environment classes in the ExoNet dataset. And one thing I want to highlight with this slide is that the class distributions are not evenly balanced, as visually shown in the pie graph, which is an issue in machine learning. However, these imbalances are representative of the real world and the frequency at which we interact with each of these environments. So presumably, such imbalances should be somehow represented in your classification system. Now, compared to other computer vision datasets for robotic prosthetic legs and exoskeletons, the ExoNet dataset is actually one of the largest and most diverse dataset that has been developed and published to date. And this can be characterized by having significantly more images, as well as more than double the number of individually labeled classes. And we also uploaded the ExoNet dataset to IEEE Dataport, including the annotations, and made the dataset publicly available to the research community. And so if you're interested to learn more about ExoNet, then please check out our Frontiers in Robotics and AI paper. Now, to provide a reference and benchmark for the research community, we then trained and tested over a dozen state-of-the-art deep convolutional neural networks, as shown on the right-hand side, on the ExoNet dataset for image classification. Now, as an example, here is the resulting multi-class confusion matrix for one of those deep learning models during inference on the test set. Here, the columns and rows are the predicted and labeled classes respectively, and the diagonal elements are the prediction accuracies for each environment class. So for example, this deep learning model was able to predict transitions from decline stairs to level ground terrain with approximately 79% accuracy. And so if you're interested to learn more about this particular neural network and its performance, then please check out our 2021 EMBC paper. So the ExoNet dataset also allowed us to perform one of the first large-scale comparative analyses between different deep learning models on a computer vision dataset specifically for robotic prosthetic legs and exoskeletons. And our analysis showed that the EfficientNet B0 network, which was developed by Google, was able to achieve one of the highest overall prediction accuracies. We also showed that VGG16 is able to achieve the fastest inference time, which can be important for real-time control. And finally, our analysis showed that the MobileNet V2 network, which was also developed by Google, is able to achieve the best net score. Now, net score is a new operational metric developed by one of my colleagues that uniquely balances the classification accuracy with the computational and memory storage requirements of the neural network, which can be important for onboard real-time inference with mobile and embedded computing devices. And so if you're interested to learn more about this comparative analysis, then please check out our Frontiers in Neurorobotics paper. Now, despite our best efforts, we weren't able to achieve classification accuracies higher than approximately 73% on the ExoNet dataset. And so this motivated us to take a more systematic approach and to break down the computer vision problem into smaller series of locomotor activities. And so we started with stare recognition because it presents one of the greatest safety risks to older adults and/or rehabilitation patients. And we focused on 4 main environmental states, including level ground transition to inclined stairs, the next being steady state inclined stairs, although I don't show that here just because of limitations in space. The third being inclined stairs transition back to level ground, and finally steady state level ground terrain. Now, building on the ExoNet dataset, we designed a new computer vision dataset called StairNet specifically for automated stare recognition. And we use new definitions for the class boundaries in order to separate different environmental states. We then trained and tested the MobileNet V2 network on StairNet for image classification, and our resulting multiclass confusion matrix showed that our system was able to achieve over 98% overall prediction accuracy on these complex real-world stare environments. We also recently deployed our automated stare recognition system on a mobile device to show onboard real-time inference. And so here you see the system predicts level ground, then level ground to inclined stairs, then steady state inclined stairs, then inclined stairs to level ground, steady state level ground to inclined stairs to level ground, and then finally steady state level ground terrain. And all of this is done, as you can see, in real time with extremely high accuracy, and this is without even optimizing the system to leverage the onboard GPU. Now, compared to other vision-based automated stare recognition systems for robotic prosthetic legs and exoskeletons, the StairNet system was able to achieve one of the highest overall prediction accuracies, but on one of the largest data sets that has been published to date. And so this is indicative of its widespread generalization to many different real-world environments. Now, despite this robust performance, here are some interesting examples where our system misclassified the environment. The images in the top row were misclassified as level ground terrain transition to inclined stairs, presumably because of the horizontal line features in the upper half of the images. The images in the middle row were misclassified as incline stairs, again likely due to these horizontal line features, but this time spread throughout the image. And finally, the images in the bottom row were misclassified as level ground terrain. Now, similar to the ExoNet dataset, we uploaded the StairNet dataset, including the annotations, to IEEE Dataport and made it publicly available to the research community. And so if you're interested to learn more about the StairNet system, then please check out our new 2022 I-Core paper. So just to summarize, we designed a preliminary environment recognition system which established the feasibility of using deep learning for this new computer vision application. We also developed ExoNet, which still remains one of the largest computer vision datasets for robotic prosthetic legs and exoskeletons. We also conducted a large-scale comparative analyses of different state-of-the-art convolutional neural networks, and our analyses showed that the MobileNet V2 network achieves one of the best operational performances. And most recently, we developed the StairNet system, which is now one of the largest and most accurate automated stair recognition systems for robotic prosthetic legs and exoskeletons. And we deployed the system on a mobile device for onboard real-time inference. I'll now just briefly mention some next steps moving forward and what we're currently pursuing at the University of Toronto. So we're now working on developing a sequential image classification system in order to exploit the temporal dynamics of human locomotion. We're also developing a semi-supervised learning system in order to leverage the massive amounts of unlabeled data that we have in our database. We're also transitioning away from our previous research platform to a fully integrated head-mounted computer vision system, aka smart glasses. And future research will eventually focus on sensor fusion of our smart glasses with onboard mechanical, inertial, and/or neuromuscular sensors for environment adaptive locomotion mode intent recognition. And this is not trivial. In fact, this research by one of my colleagues is one of the first and only examples of using computer vision for online control of a robotic prosthetic leg. And here the team mounted a depth camera on the knee of the prosthetic leg. So I just want to finish up by taking this opportunity to acknowledge my awesome research collaborators, our funding agencies, and the various institutions where this research was conducted. So thank you very much for listening.
Excellent, Brokoslaw. That was very interesting, very well presented. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you're doing supporting those affected in the Ukraine. I think that's just outstanding. We have some questions. So Jesse, if you want to go ahead first and ask your question.
Hi, yes, excellent talk. Very, very interesting. I was wondering if you thought about using a multi-camera system with different fields of view to help improve. So for example, you can have an ultra wide angle to do scene recognition and object detection. So you know what's incoming in the scene. And when the person wearing the camera approaches the stairs, then use that to do finer recognition that way. And sorry, piggyback on this, I was curious about what kind of performance for online inference did you get for like the mobile phone deployment in terms of frames per second? Thanks.
Yeah, so for the mobile deployment, we're literally working on just generating those metrics right now. So I can't give you exact numbers. We just recently deployed that. I gave an invited talk at the ICRA conference down in Philadelphia. This is like one of the most prestigious robotics conferences in the world. And we really wanted to try to be able to rush to get mobile deployment for that. So we haven't gotten to the actual metrics yet, but that is to come soon, so stay tuned. With regards to your question of possibly utilizing other cameras in order to improve the prediction accuracy and performance, with these systems, I would mention two things. One is we want to utilize the minimal amount of sensors as possible. This is because these are wearable devices, and the more weight that a user has, this has the potential to increase discomfort, to also increase the metabolic cost of locomotion, but then it also increases the cost of these devices. So for example, some of the devices that I was working on when I did my PhD at Waterloo, these devices cost upwards to $100,000. And so we want to be able to make these technologies more accessible. And so whatever we can do to minimize costs, including reducing the number of sensors, this has multiple benefits.
Excellent, thank you. I think we might have time to squeeze in one more if there's a burning question. I think we are good. So again, thank you so much, Brokoslaw, for that excellent presentation. We are eagerly looking forward to all the work that's coming. So please keep us in the loop with all of these advances. Very fascinating, very excited, it's changing very quickly. I also just want to thank you for your work creating that open access or contributing to that open access data set. I mean, these are the types of things that we actually need to move AI in medicine along. And so thank you so much for that. Scott, I see your hand up. Do you quickly want to ask your question before we move on?
Yeah, sorry, let me turn on my camera. That was really interesting, Rock. I was wondering, so often with deep neural networks, when you have cases where the algorithm is having trouble recognizing things like inclined stairs or ground to inclined stairs, have you considered using a generative adversarial network, which is almost designed to train the network on these tricky concepts?
That is in our pipeline. That is in our development pipeline. Some of the things that I mentioned in our future work, this is what we're currently doing right now during the summer. And this is in collaboration with several students that we've actually been able to bring over from Ukraine, as well as some collaborative opportunities remotely as well. So that's what we're focusing on right now over the summer. Beyond that, what you just mentioned is very much in line with our development pipeline. So stay tuned.
Very cool. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Scott, for the great question. Okay, Michael, over to you. So you're welcome to share your screen whenever you're ready, and I will just introduce you. So Michael Lee holds an Honors Bachelor's of Science from the University of Toronto with a specialization in pathobiology, major in biochemistry, and minor in Latin, which I thought was very interesting. He recently defended his thesis for Master's of Science in Laboratory Medicine Pathobiology. Congratulations. And during his undergrad studies, he was involved with basic science research on epigenetic pathways of endothelial cells, and he completed his undergraduate thesis in Dr. Philip Marsden's lab. And for his master's, he branched out to learn more about digital pathology, which is a really dynamic field that can revolutionize the diagnostic pathway, and in turn contribute to the development of various computational tools to move pathology forward. And obviously, there's a lot of AI and machine learning involved in digital pathology as well. So without further ado, Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Laura. So as Laura's introduced, I'm currently, well, I just finished my master's degree here in the Department of Laboratory Medicine and Pathobiology. And this talk will be on some of the computational tools that I have developed over the past 2 years or so in the lab of Dr. Phidias Diamandis, and hopefully how this can provide quality assurance tools or come up with diagnosis, classification results for pathologists as part of their workflows. And so the talk is entitled Developing a Compound Computational Pathology Workflow for Automated and Integrated Analyses of Morphologic and Molecular Histopathological Features. But before I dive into the computer vision tools, the convolutional neural networks and all that, I think it's important to kind of briefly talk about how diagnosis works in medicine, modern medicine. And, it could be as qualitative as just a brief inspection of a skin lesion over here on the left, to something very objective and quantitative like molecular sequencing, which could take weeks, much more longer, and also be much more costly as well. But where pathology lies is somewhere in the middle, where pathologists would look at H&E stained whole slide images on a digital that were scanned by digital scanners, or something like immunohistochemistry stains that you can look at and quantify. And based on the results of the immunohistochemistry, you can subclassify things like brain tumors, or in this case, this neurofibroma. And so just to go over the neuropathology workflow that my PI, who himself is a neuropathologist, how he operates in his day-to-day life is, first we start with an H&E stained slide, and he would look at it and then kind of look at the morphology, the histology of the cells, cellular patterns and also things like mitoses and what kind of patterns there are. And from there on, he would come up with sort of a general diagnosis. And then he could order a couple of immunohistochemistry stains like IDH1, ATRX, and P53. These are relevant for a type of brain tumor called glioma. And based on the results of the immunohistochemistry, he can come up with an ultimate diagnosis. And this is sort of anaplastic oligodendroglioma or astrocytoma that's IDH mutant based on these results. And from there on, you can also do other molecular studies like sequencing as well, just to kind of confirm or dive even more in depth about what type of brain tumor or cancer this is. And the advantages of this pathology workflow is that it has excellent turnaround. It has low tissue requirements, often in the form of biopsies, as well as it's very cost effective compared to sequencing tests. But the disadvantage is that there's a lot of manual steps, as I've alluded here, looking at all these cells, cellular features, counting the number of nuclei that are positive in these immunohistochemistry stains, etc. And so the research question for my project was, can we develop an automated approach that sort of mimics this modern neuropathology workflow in the form of a fully digitalized, automated workflow? And so I came up with these 4 major steps that sort of mimics the modern pathology workflow. And the first major step, we called it histomorphologic classification. And as the name suggests, and how pathologists work, you would first have AI tools examine the morphology and histology of these cells under the microscope and in the form of digital whole slide images. The second major step is biomarker quantification. So these immunohistochemistry stained whole slide images could be quantified and analyzed by a different set of computational tools. And so in this approach, we would use things like instant segmentation approach to quantify and count the number of positive nuclei. Third major step is sort of interpreting all these results, combining them together, and lastly, to come up with an integrated diagnosis using decision trees. And so I'll be going over each of these major steps in my presentation and going more in depth about how we came about to develop them. The first major step we do is histomorphologic quantification or classification of H&E stained whole slide images using neural networks. And in this approach, we mainly use something called semantic segmentation using computational neural networks. And how it briefly works is it works in a similar manner, I guess, or at least it has a similar architecture to a biological neural network, although it works quite very differently from how our neurons function. But essentially, there will be an input like an image. And in this case, there's an image of a cat, and hidden layers would detect things like edges and different features of this image to ultimately come up with an output or a classification. And for digital pathology purposes, we would train them using different classes of H&E stained images, and different classes meaning different, I guess, objects like white matter, gray matter that are present in the tissues of the whole slide images. And we would also, of course, have lesional tissue, or essentially tumors, the different types of tumors. And we mainly wanted to focus on brain tumors, the 4 most common brain tumors in neuropathology cases, namely meningioma, glioma, metastatic tumors, as well as schwannoma. And so using these 15 or 16 classes, we would train our histomorphologic classifier to be able to identify the different features that are in the H&E stained whole slide images. And just to sort of demonstrate this, we would have thousands of training images in these form of image tiles, train convolutional neural networks. And afterwards, we would test it to ensure that it's working as intended with high accuracy. So this is sort of the general approach to a lot of machine learning workflows, including digital pathology. And what's great about this is, especially with tissue sections from biopsies, they don't just contain tumors. They often contain artifacts as well as blood, necrosis, and other things that are present in the brain or in the tissue. And so when it comes to these whole slide images, we would run them through convolutional neural networks, and then they could also generate things like heat map that are visually appealing and kind of tell you what the different parts of the tissue are. So in this case, there's a lot of necrosis, 50% of them highlighted in this purplish color. There's also blood, lesional tissue, which is tumor, etc. Same goes for here. In this case, there's mainly lesional tissue, but there's a lot of other components like normal cells as well, like in the form of gray matter and white matter. And when we tested this using our to see how it performed in classification result of our 4 most common brain tumor types, we got this confusion matrix. So we had a sample of around 120 or so whole slide images, run them through this newly developed histomorphologic classifier, and the only errors were 2 whole slide images of schwannomas being misclassified as meningiomas over here. And most likely due to sort of looking a lot like meningiomas with spindle features. So oftentimes meningiomas and schwannomas, they could look pretty similar. So these were sort of what we thought of as sort of errors, but errors that made sense. So moving on to the second step of this sort of workflow is what we wanted to achieve was being able to quantify the different immunohistochemistry stains. And especially for nuclear markers that are basically staining for nuclear antibodies that bind to proteins that are in the nucleus, we wanted to use something called instant segmentation, which is essentially semantic segmentation with object detection. So previously, for our H&E-based histomorphologic classifier, we would look at this H&E stained whole slide image, identify what the general classes of the tissue types are. And a good analogy would be an image of over here with a group of people. And this whole group of individuals would be classified as one class, being person. But with a nuclear stain like Ki67 over here, we want to be able to kind of mark each of these nucleus and be able to count them that are positive, and the ones that are negative over here in blue in the background as negative. And so we needed instant segmentation. And again, going back to this analogy, we wanted to basically come up with sort of object detection of each of these individuals and be able to count them and individualize them. And when we were able to, what we were able to achieve was come up again with an instant segmentation based classifier using mask RCNN. And as you can see here, the positive nuclei in brown are highlighted in red in this heat map, and the ones that are negative in blue are highlighted in blue in the heat map on the right after it processes it. For cytoplasmic stains, we kept on using semantic segmentation because in this task, they don't necessarily count the nuclei, but just sort of stains brown throughout the cytoplasm. And so for this approach, we decided to keep it with semantic segmentation because one of the benefits with that is that it has much more faster analysis time. And so what we wanted to do next was be able to see how the AI performs, especially with regards to this newly trained instant segmentation based approach with pathologist average score. And so we took this nuclear stain Ki67 and had AI score around 100 images of Ki67 at varying quantification levels, and had 3 different neuropathologists average the score as well. And as you can see, the correlation of the result is very, very strong here between the AI and the pathologists. And in fact, the AI sort of how it classified and quantified lied somewhere in the middle between the three different pathologists we had, with an average R value between the AI and the different pathologists, somewhere in the middle, whereas the pathologists would have a widely different criteria for how they quantified these nuclear stains. The challenges still remain, though, especially if we wanted to unify the H&E stained analyses and the IC quantification with respect to horizontal translation between the H&E stained whole slide image and the IC, as well as 180-degree rotation. And so we wanted to see if there is a way we can sort of align these different two images, tissue sections essentially, and be able to do a combined analysis on both of them. And that's when we use something called image registration, specifically scale-invariant feature transform, to align the different images. And this is a good analogy where a picture of a cathedral was taken from two different vantage points. And ultimately they're of the same object, but they're ultimately two different images. Similarly, our whole slide images, our tissue sections are from different cuts of the tissue. And so there might be slight differences. And so by using scale-invariant feature transform, we wanted to see if we can align and match different features of the two different images together. And just to demonstrate this in a simplified cartoon, this is essentially what happens when we run SIFT using digital pathology whole slide images. So on the left, we have H&E stained whole slide image, and on the right, we have an IHC stained whole slide image. And it would take different features and key points from these two images and match them together. And from there on, we can do downstream analyses that kind of combine both the H&E and the IHC, incorporate them together. And prior to SIFT, we had additional image modification steps as well, like converting them to first black and white images, as you can see in the panels A and B. And from there on, also doing a pixel image normalization or pixel intensity normalization, especially because their pixel intensities are different. We would use histogram matching. And so now A and E, the only differences are essentially the morphology of the tissues. Everything else like color and pixel intensity are normalized so that SIFT can work on it and operate on it much more smoothly. And so when we use SIFT, we can essentially align these images going back in a very successful manner. Here, even despite 180-degree rotation on the bottom right image pair, you can see that the different areas of the tissue have been matched and aligned together despite the differences in the two images. And how we wanted to use SIFT in our workflow is essentially do focused analysis on specific regions of the whole slide image. So when we look at this, this is the original H&E stained whole slide image of a glioma. And after running it through first step, the histomorphologic classifier, we can generate this heat map. And essentially brown area represents the tumor, whereas the red is blood, blue is the necrosis, etc. So there are different classes within the tissue. But we want to focus on the brown region because that's where a lot of the IC stains would stain for specifically, rather than normal tissue or the necrosis, which don't have cells, and red blood cells, which we aren't interested in. And so when we look at this Ki67 IC marker, we can see that it sort of approximately stains positive, specifically in the tumor region of this tissue. And so when we use SIFT, we can kind of focus our analysis specifically on the tumor region by getting the coordinates from the original H&E stained whole slide image based on the heat map, specifically analyzed in the tumor region for the IHC to get this focused analysis over here, as you can see in the fourth step in this green region. So that's sort of one application of how we use SIFT. Another thing with SIFT is that since it selects specific regions of the tissue, it was also able to reduce computational time, especially when we use instance segmentation approach, as I've discussed in the second step. The computational time could be very, very high, especially because it's instance segmentation based. And so by using SIFT and also random sampling, we were able to drastically reduce the computational time, as you can see in this box plot on the right, without compromising sort of the accuracy of the results. As you can see on the left, the Ki-67 quantification remained similar despite us taking around 25% of the sample randomly. So the last application I want to talk about in this presentation is sort of subclassification of gliomas. So this is the confusion matrix I showed earlier with the classification results of the 4 major brain tumor classes. But in reality, brain tumors are even more complex as they can be subtyped and subclassified even further. As you can see with glioma, there's many different subtypes. There's glioblastoma, IDH wild type, oligodendroglioma, astrocytoma, etc. And so by using this decision tree, as you can see on the panel B, with diffuse glioma being able to be subclassified into astrocytoma IDH wild type, astrocytoma IDH mutant, and oligodendroglioma, we wanted to see if our workflow was able to successfully classify different glioma cases into these subcategories using our semantic segmentation, a histomorphological classifier, as well as the immunohistochemistry-based quantification. And so when we did that, we were able to reach a pretty solid confusion matrix. And despite the low sample size, I think this was sort of a promising result that this workflow has this sort of a potential. And so this was sort of a proof of concept study that we did. And just to lastly reiterate how this works, we have the H&E stained whole slide image on the bottom left, analyze it through the histomorphological classifier, and then with the IHC stained whole slide image, we would focus our analysis on the tumor region specifically and quantify the IDH immunohistochemistry stain on that tumor region specifically. And so just to demonstrate again, these are box plots that demonstrate how our quantification results were increased and improved with the addition of SIFT matching of the tumor region. And just bringing it all together, the last thing that our group wants to do is essentially sort of compile all these computational tools and the results that we gain into sort of a visually appealing report. And it would be generated in an automated fashion. And so this was sort of a prototype of what we envisioned our report would look like, that sort of is similar to how pathologists would write a report at the end of a diagnosis. And this is a more recent one with all the classification results, the heat maps, as well as the class breakdown, and some other things that our other colleagues have been working on, such as deep learning features using unsupervised learning, etc. And so by doing this, we think that this can sort of perhaps be used as a quality assurance tool, educational tool in the future in pathology. And so currently we're in the process of having this sort of validated externally with different collaborators in different centers around the world. And so it's sort of an exciting time for our group right now. So just to summarize, our group sort of came up with 4 major steps with H&E stained slide, IHC-based image quantification, as well as image registration that gathers all the information together to come up with an integrated diagnosis in the end. And this workflow just summarizes everything that I've talked about today. And if you want to learn more about what I've done, we've also just recently published 2 original papers in these journals. And so I just want to thank my supervisor as well as lab members for their continued support throughout my time in my master's project. Thank you.
Excellent work, Michael. Tremendous amount of work and very innovative. I really love that you're doing user testing, sounds like, and figuring out how these innovations can make their way into the clinical workflow. That's so important, and really exciting to hear that. Okay, questions. There's one in the chat, so maybe I'll start with that. But if anybody else has questions, again, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. So the first question comes from Rosemary. Have you applied your instance segmentation on images from various institutions? The stains can vary from lab to lab, and I wonder if the intensity of the background could impact the identification of negative cells.
Yeah, and this is an excellent question because, you know, different hospitals, different centers have different staining protocols, which might change sort of the color, the intensity, as well as different centers have different scanners, which could result in differences in the images, whole slide images again. And so this is sort of I think one of the biggest issues when it comes to sort of generalizing a lot of computational tools. And so external validation is one of the most important steps in our workflow. And so recently, I've just graduated, but my sort of the lab members that other lab members have been trying to work on is try to email external collaborators as well as people that can try out our computational tools. And from there on, we want to see if it would have similar results for things like our instance segmentation, as well as even histomorphologic classification of, H&E stained whole slide images. And so that's sort of an important next major step that we hope to see how it works. And, there might be changes, of course, but one of the things about AI is that, especially nowadays, I think the big approach that a lot of people are looking into is semi-supervised approach, where we constantly improve and sort of annotate so that the AI workflow constantly evolves with new images that we can gather from other centers as well.
That's excellent. And I think that's, it's really exciting to see more and more collaboration across labs. That's something that in the beginning we weren't seeing as much of, but now that sort of collaboration's occurring. You're seeing these open data sets like we saw in the first presentation. So that's absolutely fantastic. Any other questions or comments from the group? All right, I think then we will end this particular talk. Thank you again, Michael. Excellent work. Congratulations again on just finishing up. You accomplished a lot, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank you both. Those were incredible talks and a really excellent start to our 2022 T-CAIREM trainee rounds. I think you can see the quality and actually how difficult it was to choose the work that's happening led by T-CAIREM trainees at our institution. And so just thank you both so much. That was really incredible. And a couple just quick announcements before we close off today. So the first announcement is something that's very exciting. I just like to let everybody know, if you don't already know or you haven't already heard, and hopefully someone will put the link in the chat, that T-CAIREM's been awarded an international award. At the AI Med Global Summit, which was last week, T-CAIREM won the award for AI Med Institution of the Year. So thank you all for your support to T-CAIREM. Thank you to the Temerty family for making this all possible. It never would have been possible without their generous support. And the members, of course, who are doing the amazing work and forming these rich collaborations that are allowing this success. It's unbelievable how much we've grown this past year, and that's thanks to all of you. So just want to thank everybody and let everyone know that exciting news in case you hadn't heard it. Lastly, I also just want to encourage you to come back. So that was the first of our set of trainee round presentations. We have several others. If you go onto our website under events, you will see trainee rounds, not just the trainee rounds presentations, but also other events. We have speaker series where we invite international luminaries to speak to us. And we also have a great roster of local talent. We have some professors from our environment speaking next week. So you can also tune in for those as well. So please check out our events, follow us, and keep us up to date to what you're doing. Thank you again to our speakers, fantastic work, and to all of you for taking the time to attend today. Really appreciate it.